Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter is a book by Seth Grahame-Smith. Seth Grahame-Smith is also the author of a very popular book known as Prejudice and Zombies. I would definitely recommend this book as well, though my review isn't currently over this one. This is also a very, very nice book, very humorous. In fact, many people liked this one much better than Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter. But this review isn't about this, so that's for another time. Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter is a very interesting book. I think it's very well written. The author, Seth Grahame-Smith, definitely knows his history. He did a lot of research, or he just already knew, I'll assume, research. And the book's actually all factually correct regarding Abraham Lincoln. It actually starts off with him in the log cabin, him growing up, his running for presidency, all the actual events of his life. So it's all factual, obviously minus the vampire part. But it's all sewn around factual information, which I have found that very interesting that an author could do that. I'm kind of impressed. I've never really heard of anyone really doing something like that before, taking actual history and then sewing a story around it. So he had to work with something that already existed and then make it look like everything else could have actually happened. Because the way he writes the story, obviously we know it's not true, but he writes it as if to say, this is what really happened, little known to all of us. So it's very interesting. He does a very good job of it. I think it was a very nice book. For example, some of the things he does is he ties in slavery to vampires, saying that the vampires are all part of the Confederacy, or most of them, I should say. They support slavery because they can get blood that way from people for very cheap without causing any problem, because no one cares if the slaves are all dying. To them, the Confederacy in America, they're just slaves. So the vampires see that as a good thing. They're all for slavery, for Confederacy, and they actually end up almost helping to be a catalyst in the Civil War, American Civil War, the vampires do. So it's very interesting just how he can tie in history and his own story all into the book. It's a fairly short book also, about 300 pages or so. I went through it in a few days. Didn't take very long with a bit of reading. And I mean, it's a great little read. It's nothing big, but it's a nice little read. Most people can blow through it in just about a week or two. Give them something to do. It's a very, very well-written book, very entertaining. Some negatives of it, though. Personally, I love the Civil War. Like, the history surrounding that era is just very interesting to me. And I just love learning about it, hearing about it. So I figured, when this book gets to the Civil War, that is going to be awesome. Because I like vampires a lot, and I like the Civil War, and I love Abraham Lincoln. He is one of my favorite presidents. Well, he is my favorite president. So I thought, how can you go wrong with that? But unfortunately, apparently you can. The Civil War section felt very rushed. Here I was thinking this would be the best point to make the story more drawn out, to be the main part of the story, the whole Civil War. But it just rushed right by. It went so fast. It didn't feel. It felt like Seth Grahame-Smith could have done a much better job with that section than he did. I'm not going to make any suggestions as to what he could have done to improve it. I'm not a writer by any means, but I just feel like there was something else he could have done to have improved upon it. And it's not bad by any means. It was still good. It just could have used improvement, I feel. Other than that, there were some dull parts to this book, I think, especially in the beginning, where I'd read for about an hour before I had to do something, like I'll be having dinner in an hour, I'm going to read for a bit to kill some time, so I'd pick up this book and read it. And then after dinner I just wouldn't really feel like picking it back up. I would anyways, because I just wanted to finish the book. It was a good book, but just some parts just wouldn't catch you, especially in the beginning. They were just a little dull from time to time, and later on through it, when it becomes more, about halfway through or so, a little bit past halfway I think, it just starts to become like factual information about Abraham Lincoln for a little bit, and ceases to be about vampires. Now, I don't want to say that that's not interesting, just I bought the book under the premises it was going to be about Abraham Lincoln, the vampire hunter, and some sections were just a little dull. So, other than that, though, I mean, it held my attention very well. There were some parts where I would just read for hours, provided it didn't take more than a couple of hours to finish the book, but I would just continuously keep on reading. It really caught my attention at some parts, minus those slow drudgery parts. And I kind of feel one of the reasons for that might be that this book almost seems like it was written to be a screenplay instead. Like the author had the intention of this becoming a movie, which I now believe to be true, considering these screenplay rights have been sold and this will be a movie someday. The book just felt at some points like it was written as a movie rather than a book. And don't get me wrong, that's a good thing. At some parts, I liked saying, wow, this scene would be really good as a movie, or I could just really see people like doing this part of the book. So I am excited for the movie too. It just felt like in some parts it almost hindered the book. Some dialogue-oriented parts, the dialogue just felt a little choppy. Felt like it was more in a screenplay. So those are really my only complaints with the book. I mean, beyond that, this was a very nice book. It's definitely not one of the best books I've ever read, but it's a very good book. It's in my bookshelf right now. It'll probably sit there until I die, and I probably won't read it again, but the first read through was all I needed. It was a good book, and I enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy the end very much, though, actually. Well, it wasn't bad, but I felt, once again, to beat a dead horse, it just felt like it could have been better, improved upon. And it's not so much the ending was bad as it was just I didn't really care much for it. It's hard to explain if you haven't really read the book, so I would encourage you to read it and see what you think of the ending if you haven't already. But I just feel like it didn't really end things very well. In one way I liked it because I love Abraham Lincoln, so I liked what the author did with it, but I didn't like it from the story's perspective. It just didn't seem to fit right. But it wasn't bad. And the book wasn't bad. As I've said many a time now, it is a good book. It's a great little read-through. I would definitely suggest going and picking it up. It'll kill a few hours, in a good way. It'll entertain you. It's a very nice book, very good premises. If you like vampires, it's a good book. Some of the action scenes are very, very exhilarating. They really get you when he's fighting with some of the vampires and what's happening. And I would definitely recommend it, if you haven't read it already. So, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Great book. I would give it an 8 out of 10. It was very well written. The author was... I can tell the author was very skilled and wrote this very well, but it just felt like there were some sections that he was a little iffy on, you know. So, 8 out of 10 would be my rating for it. Good book. I would definitely suggest buying it still, and I'm sure you'll love it. It's a great book. So, that's Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter.